how many times has it developed you and made you stronger? And sometimes it's not just because you passed the test. Sometimes it's because you failed the test. Here Abraham passes because he's at the end of his journey. He's strong by this point. Earlier in his life, Abraham would not have passed this test. Abraham couldn't even pass the test to wait on the promised son when he was younger. And he went ahead with Hagar. Remember that? So Abraham, we see here, is passing a test at the end of his life. Sometimes in our lives we fail them, but even in those moments, God is working and God is building. I wonder, if you thought about your life this morning, are there any ways you are being tested? Are there any ways right now that God is putting a question before you? Is it me or is it that? Is it me and following me, or is it this other thing or person or relationship or whatever it is? Is it this other thing, or is it the Lord God who has provided and will and promises to continue to provide for you? All right, that's the first thing. In verses 1 to 2, we see that test put before Abraham. But then, if you look with me at verses 3 to 8, we have a journey that Abraham takes. And right there in verse 3, the amazing response of Abraham begins to be unfolded. Because notice what it says about Abraham. Abraham rose when? Early in the morning. All right, now this is not just a statement of Abraham being an early bird or a morning person. This is a statement of Abraham's immediate obedience to God. Now put yourself in Abraham's shoes. Would you rise early the next day and immediately begin to do this thing that God has asked you to do? Right. You couldn't sleep, probably. You probably wouldn't have been able to sleep. But would you have gotten up to do that? Or would you rather have gotten up to begin to pepper God with questions? Because as I thought about this, that's what I think I would do. I'd be up early in the morning, all right, but I'd be saying, God, what about this? What about that? Explain this, explain that. Tell me how all of this is going to work out exactly. And Lord, if you tell me how to understand it, if you tell me how to sort of tell the future and see what's going to happen if I do this, then maybe I'll consider doing it. But Abraham doesn't do all that. Abraham instead gets up early and begins to make steps of obedience. He saddled his donkey. He took 2 of his young men. He took his son Isaac. Verse 3, he cut the wood for the burnt offering. He was an old man. He cut the wood and arose and immediately began to go to the place that God told him. And it tells us that that place was a 3-day journey by donkey. Which makes a lot of sense because Abraham at this point is living in Beersheba, a town in the south of Israel, and Moriah is in what is now Jerusalem. So that's a 45-mile journey through the desert, and that would take probably about 3 days by foot or on donkey's back. I have actually been on this trail personally that Abraham took from Beersheba to Jerusalem. I didn't take the full 45 miles. I only took an afternoon on the top of a camel on this same trail. And I can tell you that there's nothing out there. It is completely barren. And I'm sure that all 3 days, all 45 miles, Abraham is thinking. And Abraham has opportunity after opportunity in the quietness and stillness of that place to turn back and to change his mind and to rethink his obedience. And yet, notice, when he sees the mountain after 3 days, verse 4, what does he do? Verse 5, stay here with the donkey, I and the boy. And by boy, he, I think, is using an affectionate term for his son. It's most likely that Isaac at this point is around 18 years old, that he is a young man at this point. He's just graduated high school. And yet Abraham says, me and the lad, me and the young boy are going to go over there and worship. And I want you to notice what he says next. And we will come again to you. And everybody said, time out, Abraham. How are you and the boy going to go worship? And a part of that worship is going to be you slaughtering him and burning him. How is he and you going to return back to the young men and the donkey? And I want to tell you what the writer to the Hebrews said about this scene. He said Abraham said that in faith because Abraham knew that even if it took God raising Isaac back from the dead, he would do it. That if Abraham was obedient to God, God would do anything to back Abraham up. He would even raise his son Isaac from the dead and give him back to his father. And so Abraham speaks with a confidence that simply doesn't make sense if you're only going by what your eyes can see. If you're only going by what human beings can understand. And then, of course, there's Isaac. Isaac is, we see, going willingly. He's an 18-year-old young man, most likely. And notice in verse 6, it makes this wonderful statement that both of them went together up the mountain. And it repeats that same thing in verse 8. So they went, both of them together, to emphasize this was not a case of kidnapping. This was not a case of child abuse. This was a father and a son who together were deciding to go and worship the Lord and together willing to do whatever it was God asked. In fact, when Isaac asked that great question, Lord, I see, or Father, I see the fire, I see the wood, but where is the lamb for the burnt offering? Abraham again speaks in faith. And Isaac accepts what his father says. God will provide for himself. God is the one who's going to give himself that burnt offering that he has required. You see, Abraham understood something about God. When God requires something, he also gives it. When God requires something of us, he also provides it. When God calls us to do something, he's also willing to go with us. He's willing to prepare the road. He's willing to give us those things we need in order to carry out what God has said. Abraham is, in spite of not being able to see, walking with obedient trust. And I think that is a beautiful lesson for us anytime our faith is tested. Because the testing of faith usually always involves not being able to verify our faith by our sight, or not being able to verify God's promises by what things look like in our lives or look like around us. And boys and girls, this is where I want to talk about flying an airplane. I've never flown an airplane myself, but I have been in a lot of airplanes, and I know personally at least 4 or 5 pilots that I've talked to because I'm very fascinated by airplanes. And one of the things I've learned from them is that there are 2